Okay, let's unpack this.
Hey, let's do it.
We've all seen the news headlines, right? The talk of congressional gridlock, these last-minute deals to stop a government shutdown.
Mm-hmm. The drama.
Exactly. And what comes out of all that chaos is this document, H.R. 5371.
And the official title is a mouthful.
It really is. The Continuing Appropriations, Agriculture, Legislative Branch, Military Construction and Veterans Affairs, and Extensions Act 2026.
Yeah, it sounds incredibly dull.
It does. But this piece of legislation, it's not just about keeping the lights on in federal buildings. It's more like a temporary rule book.
That's a good way to put it.
And it's packed with these really specific exceptions and, some long-term policy decisions that actually affect everything, from the price of your next prescription drug to whether a small town's water system gets the help it needs.
And that is precisely our mission today. We're going to try and translate this incredibly dense legislative beast into clear, actionable insight for you. We often think of these stopgap measures as just, autopilot funding. But when you actually dive into the structure, the details,
The carve-outs.
the specific funding carve-outs, the program extensions, it really reveals what Congress's true immediate priorities are, regardless of all the budget uncertainty. This is the playbook for the next few months, and it's surprisingly detailed.
So let's start with the foundation then, the Continuing Resolution, or the CR. For our listeners who are informed adults, so maybe not legislative experts, how do we define this thing simply?
The easiest way to think about it is like the government hitting its emergency credit card.
Okay.
It's a temporary funding tool. It only gets used because Congress failed to pass the 12 normal annual appropriations bills before the start of the fiscal year on October 1st.
So this is Plan B.
It's Plan B. The CR temporarily gives agencies the authority to spend money, but, and this is the key part, generally only at the rate of the previous fiscal year. In this case, that's fiscal year 2025 levels. It's an administrative safety net.
And how long does this specific safety net last? Because that deadline is everything.
Yeah.
It determines how long we have until the next big budget fight.
It does. The timeline here is short and it's decisive. According to Section 106(3) of the bill, the funding provided by the CR, it's set to expire on January 30th, 2026.
January 30th. So that's just a few months.
About 4 months for Congress to either agree on a full permanent budget for FY 2026 or, face passing yet another short-term CR. The clock is definitely ticking.
And there's a really important guiding rule for the agency spending this money, right? Section 110. It seems designed to just prevent any kind of, forward momentum.
It is the ultimate brake pedal. That's a
Wow.
perfect description. Section 110 mandates, and I'm sort of paraphrasing here, that the act has to be implemented so that only the most limited funding action is taken.
The most limited.
It's just enough to provide for the continuation of existing projects and activities.
So that confirms it. Agencies can't launch new research. They can't buy expensive new equipment or, hire a bunch of staff for new initiatives.
Nope. They have to essentially just keep doing exactly what they were doing in 2025.
Yeah.
No more, no less. It really limits any kind of administrative innovation, and it does that by design.
But, and this is what we're going to get into, this massive bill, H.R. 5371, it's structured to let certain high priority items just bypass that brake pedal. It's split into these divisions, A through H, and they cover everything from healthcare to the VA to the core rules we just talked about.
And the exceptions within those divisions, that's what tells the real story.
Exactly.
And to really understand what Congress was thinking, we have to look first at what they were unwilling to let pause, even for a short time.
And that leads us straight into the defense budget.
It does.
So when you hear continuing resolution, I think the immediate assumption is that these multi-billion-dollar defense contracts, they just stall out.
Right. Everything freezes.
But looking at our sources here, Congress worked extremely hard to make sure that certain, mission-critical programs not only continued, but in some cases accelerated.
Yeah.
Completely circumventing the whole spirit of a temporary budget.
And this contrast between the general rule and these very specific exceptions is where, the legislative sausage making becomes fascinating.
Right.
Section 102, it sets up these really strict guardrails for the Department of Defense. It says funds cannot be used for new production. You can't increase production rates above FY 2025 levels, and you can't start any project that wasn't previously funded.
So it's designed to prevent that budget creep.
Exactly.
Wait a minute, though. If that CR rule is so restrictive, how is Congress legally able to fund projects above the 2025 rate Isn't that technically breaking their own rule?
That's a great question. And they do it by including specific sections outside of the main CR rules. They essentially add riders that start with the magic words, notwithstanding Section 102.
Ah, okay. A legal carve-out.
It's a legal carve-out, and these carve-outs are political tells. They show you the programs that Congress believes are absolutely non-negotiable, often driven by, current geopolitical threats or maybe just long-term stability for the industrial base.
Okay, so let's look at the clearest example of this. The Air Force's E-7 Wedgetail program. This isn't just maintaining things. This looks like aggressive, rapid modernization.
It is. The E-7 Wedgetail, this is the replacement for the Air Force's aging fleet of AWACS aircraft.
The ones with the big saucers on top.
The very same. They're vital for battlefield command and control. The Air Force desperately needs this modernization to stay relevant, and Sections 128 and 129 show that Congress simply would not accept any delay on this program.
So tell us what kind of money they authorized to keep this specific project moving so fast.
Okay, so first, they allocate $199,676,000 for research, development, test, and evaluation Air Force.
Okay.
And that money is specifically for the continued rapid prototyping of the E-7 Wedgetail. That's nearly $200 million just for design and testing, not even buying the planes yet. It ensures the program keeps moving forward quickly, even with all the budget uncertainty.
But the real power move, I think, in terms of finding the money, is the authorized transfer. This is where Congress gets really creative, isn't it?
Absolutely. Section 129 authorizes the transfer of an additional $200 million.
Wow.
That's $200 million, and it's coming from unobligated balances in the aircraft procurement accounts, and it's being moved directly into the Wedgetail's RDT&E account.
So let me get this straight. They're taking money that was budgeted for something else but wasn't spent.
Correct.
And they're just redirecting it to this single critical priority.
That's exactly what they're doing. They're pooling funds to keep the program on track.
So Congress found almost $400 million by combining a direct allocation and a strategic transfer just to make sure that the next generation airborne command platform stays on schedule.
Yep.
Is there any pushback on using unobligated balances like this? I mean, doesn't that set a kind of dangerous precedent for future CRs, letting agencies just raid other accounts?
It definitely raises concerns about transparency, about the erosion of budgetary discipline, no question. And while it's technically legal under this specific authorization, it really signals that for truly urgent modernization, especially programs that respond to, great power competition, Congress is going to prioritize speed and capability over sticking to the traditional budget rules. They are willing to use these legislative overrides to force spending into high-priority areas, even if it means moving money around behind the scenes.
Okay, so moving from the Air Force to the Navy, we see similar protections, but for these massive, decades-long industrial commitments. Shipbuilding.
Right, and shipbuilding and conversion contracts are maybe the single most difficult thing to pause in the entire federal budget.
Why is that?
Well, they're multi-year, multi-billion-dollar commitments. They involve thousands of high-tech jobs all across the country.
Oh.
If the government fails to pay the shipyards on time, those yards can actually shut down. You lose expertise, you lose industrial capacity.
So it's a huge ripple effect.
A huge one. And Section 131 explicitly protects shipbuilding and conversion Navy, allowing funds to be apportioned to complete prior year programs, totally bypassing the CR restriction.
So give us a sense of the scale here, the complexity of that maintenance commitment.
Well, the funding is layered. It shows commitments from many years ago. For the carrier replacement program, for example, we see $150 million apportioned from prior year funding.
Okay.
For the crucial Virginia-class submarine program, the commitment is deep. You have $121.5 million from 2016 funding, $99.1 million from 2017, and then a huge $289.7 million from 2018 funding.
Wow. So that cumulative figure for just those submarines is, what, well over $500 million?
It is.
And that's just to honor payments on work that started 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Exactly. And then look at the TAO fleet oiler program. These are the essential logistics vessels, the gas stations of the sea.
Right.
That program gets over $960 million pulled from every single fiscal year between 2019 and 2024. This isn't discretionary spending. This is about protecting the national industrial base and ensuring the Navy's long-term logistical ability. You just can't let a CR jeopardize that.
And beyond the huge platforms, we also find these really specific foreign policy details, like the reimbursement to Palau. Why is that specific small line item even in here?
Yeah, that's Section 132. It authorizes the Secretary of Defense to reimburse the government of Palau for land acquisition costs related to U.S. defense sites.
Okay, but why now? Why in this bill?
It might seem minor, but it's a direct reference to the U.S. commitment to its Compact of Free Association partners in the Pacific. In the context of strategic competition, making sure these partners are compensated quickly and fully for hosting U.S. defense infrastructure is a really high priority. So Congress made sure this specific payment wouldn't be delayed by the CR.
Got it. And finally, within the General Military Construction Rules in Division D, Section 116 gives us a little glimpse into the reality of these massive construction timelines.
It does. Most government funds, they expire after 1 or 2 fiscal years if they aren't obligated.
Use it or lose it.
Use it or lose it. But Section 116 acknowledges the slow reality of construction. Funds for military construction can be obligated for up to 4 years after the fiscal year they were appropriated.
4 years, that's a long time.
It is, but it's just legislative realism. It prevents these multi-year projects, which involve environmental reviews, planning, bidding, and, inevitable delays, from losing their money just because of bureaucratic slowness. It secures long-term construction projects against the typical funding lapse rules.
And as we close out the defense section, there's a prohibition that is remarkably specific to current geopolitical tensions. And it's found, oddly enough, in the appropriations for the legislative branch security.
That's in H.R. 537182. It explicitly bans the architect of the Capitol. That's the person responsible for the physical safety and infrastructure of the entire Capitol complex, from using any funds to purchase a drone manufactured in the People's Republic of China.
Wait. They are banning Chinese-made drones specifically for security on Capitol Hill in a temporary funding bill.
Precisely, or from any business affiliated with them. It's a very focused effort to enforce supply chain security.
Is there an exception?
The only exception is if the drone is specifically required for national security purposes, but the default is a total prohibition. It just signals a really hard line on internal technological supply chains. It reflects this heightened concern over data transmission and surveillance from foreign-made tech, even in something as common as a drone.
So while Division A prioritized weapons systems and big contractors overseas, Division B, which covers agriculture and rural development, seems to be focusing on the fundamental infrastructure that protects communities right here at home.
That's right. This section is all about maintaining essential services and stabilizing the very backbone of rural life. The local farm offices, housing, water systems.
This feels highly practical. Directly relevant to the daily lives of millions of working families and farmers. So let's start with the Farm Service Agency, the FSA, which is really the heart of local agricultural support.
It really is.
The FSA county offices, they're where farmers go for operating loans, for disaster relief applications, all those critical program signups. How does the CR make sure these local offices are protected from potential budget cuts or, consolidation?
Stability at the local level is the absolute priority here. The FSA gets a massive $1.125 billion for its necessary expenses.
Okay.
But we need to look closer at the staffing rules in the bill. It mandates that at least $15,000 of that money is set aside specifically for hiring new employees at FSA county offices and for farm loan officers.
So not only are they funding existing staff, they're actively funding new hires, which sort of defies that standard no new activities rule of a CR.
Correct. And that $15 million, it's available until September 30th, 2027.
Wow, that's a long window.
That long availability is key. It recognizes that federal hiring is slow, and they need time to recruit and train these essential staff. It's a long-term fix for what they clearly see as a chronic understaffing problem in rural America.
And they've included a powerful legislative guardrail against the kind of consolidation that often targets these small, local, sometimes just two-person county offices.
Yes, and this is a crucial policy note. It's directly relevant to rural community stability. The legislation strictly prohibits using funds to close FSI county offices or to permanently relocate employees if it would result in an office having 2 or fewer staff.
Without congressional approval.
Without specific congressional approval. This stops headquarters from just consolidating resources and leaving small remote areas without a physical government presence. For so many small farm towns, that FSA office is their primary link to federal aid and safety nets.
Okay, moving to the Risk Management Agency, the RMA, which is the operational arm of federal crop insurance. What specific funds are included for oversight?
The RMA is crucial because it helps stabilize the risk that's just inherent in farming. It gets $60 million for expenses. But importantly, $1 million of that is explicitly earmarked for compliance and integrity activities.
So, the fraud police.
Essentially, yes. This is the necessary oversight to prevent fraud and ensure that the multi-billion-dollar crop insurance system stays solvent and fair for legitimate producers.
Now we get to this immense effort to ensure housing and utility access in areas where, let's be honest, private investment is often scarce.
This is the government stepping in where the market won't or can't.
The scale of the Rural Housing Insurance Fund programs in Title III is just staggering, particularly the loan guarantees.
The sheer volume reflects the demand. Gross loan obligations authorized include $25 billion for Section 502 unsubsidized guaranteed loans.
$25 billion.
Yeah. So think of these as federally guaranteed mortgages for low and moderate income families in rural areas. Without that guarantee, the risk to private lenders would just be too high. This ensures affordable access to capital for homeownership outside of the major urban centers.
And beyond the guarantees, there are also direct loans for people who might not even qualify for that guaranteed private lending.
Yes. $130.6 million is available for Section 502 direct loans. These target low to moderate income families who have the greatest difficulty securing conventional mortgages. This is direct government support for entry-level housing.
And I see specific support for Native American communities.
We do. There's $5 million allocated for the Single-Family Housing Relending Demonstration Program for Native American tribes. This recognizes the unique financial structures and land tenure challenges that exist in many tribal areas.
Let's talk about preserving existing affordable rental housing. I mean, when government-subsidized rental properties get old, developers often try to buy them and convert them to market rates, which displaces residents. How does this bill fight that trend?
This CR focuses heavily on incentivizing preservation. It dedicates $1,715 million just for the renewal of rental assistance agreements. But crucially, it provides direct financial incentives to nonprofits and public housing authorities, groups that are committed to long-term affordability, to acquire these existing rural housing service multifamily properties.
What kind of specific administrative incentives make that a viable choice for a nonprofit?
Well, they include allowing these nonprofits to earn a moderate return on investment on their initial equity, but the most important detail is probably the reimbursement of organizational costs. The bill allows for what's called an asset management fee, and it's set at a maximum of $7,500 per property. This fee compensates these smaller, mission-driven organizations for the specialized and time-consuming work of managing complex, affordable housing portfolios. It just makes it financially feasible for them to outbid purely for-profit buyers who would just raise the rents.
Moving to fundamental infrastructure, we see significant resources dedicated to water and waste disposal.
This is so critical. We see $35 million for technical assistance grants for rural water systems. But the real boots-on-the-ground support comes from what's called the Circuit Rider program. The bill allocates $23.9 million for contracting with qualified national organizations to deploy these circuit riders.
A circuit rider. That sounds like a specialized roving expert. How does that translate into actual help for a small community?
It's a literal and historical term for a traveling expert. So imagine a small town whose water treatment plant manager just retired, and the town can't afford a full-time professional engineer.
Okay.
A circuit rider is a technical expert who travels to that community, provides on-site, specialized assistance fixing pumps, making sure compliance testing is correct, helping with maintenance all to prevent a catastrophic system failure. This $23.9 million is securing the immediate practical health of countless tiny public utility systems across the U.S. And there's also a small but important $1 million for subgrants directly to individuals for decentralized household wastewater systems, which, acknowledges the reality that septic systems fail and rural homeowners often need help.
And finally, a specific line item connecting economic development to mobility. Rural transportation assistance.
Yes. The Rural Business Program account earmarks $50,575,000 for grants and loan costs, and within that, up to $500,000 is specifically for one grant for a national organization that provides technical assistance for rural transportation.
So it recognizes that economic development isn't just about jobs, it's about connecting workers to those jobs.
Exactly. If buses or transport services are lacking, the business development is stalled.
And tying all these rural development efforts together is the continued funding for the Institute for Rural Partnerships.
Right. Section 7682 provides $5,250,000 to continue this institute. Its mandate is to research the challenges facing rural areas and develop partnerships. This is the strategic, long-term brainpower understanding issues like broadband access, population drain, and localized economic decline to help guide future policy, rather than just reacting to every crisis.
And now we turn to the massive funding streams that directly support schools and low-income families, starting with child nutrition programs. This is one of the largest single appropriations in the entire bill.
The total here is enormous, and it secures stability for millions of children. $37,841,674,000, and it's available through September 30, 2027.
So that covers school lunch, breakfast, all of that.
All the essential programs, yes.
And within that huge number, I see targeted, specific funding for modernizing school kitchens.
This is a great example of federal funds addressing a very practical problem.
Yeah.
$10 million is allocated for competitive grants that go to state agencies to pass through to schools for equipment purchases. And this funding specifically targets equipment valued over $1,000. So think commercial ovens, walk-in coolers, or blast chillers.
The heavy-duty stuff.
The heavy-duty stuff. It's what's needed to serve healthier, fresher meals, to improve food safety, and to support the school breakfast program. If a school kitchen is running on 30-year-old equipment, they just can't produce the healthier, from-scratch meals that modern nutrition standards require. This money is meant to fix that.
And supporting that push for fresher food, there's continued funding for the Farm to School initiative.
$5 million is dedicated to the Farm to School grant program. It's a small but mighty program that aims to connect local producers directly with school procurement. By setting a grant cap of $500,000 for FY 2026, Congress ensures the money is distributed to a wider variety of local and regional initiatives, which maximizes its geographic impact.
And for emergency food assistance and aid for the elderly.
The Commodity Supplemental Food Program, which serves low-income elderly individuals, receives $460 million. Overall commodity and disaster assistance totals $551,070,000. These are the funds that keep food banks and local assistance programs stocked and operational.
Finally, in this section, let's tackle this very significant policy hold in Section 726 regarding SNFP retailer standards. This is highly relevant to consumers, especially anyone shopping in an urban food desert or small rural store.
This is a critical example of policy being used to alleviate regulatory burden. Section 726 is a policy rider that prohibits the FDA from using funds to implement, administer, or enforce the controversial 2016 final rule concerning variety requirements for SNFP retailers.
Okay, so why was that 2016 rule controversial enough to warrant a legislative pause years later?
Well, the 2016 rule attempted to impose these really strict definitions of food variety. For example, it might require a retailer to stock multiple varieties of vegetables, like 3 different types of leafy greens, just to qualify as a SNFP retailer.
And the goal was to encourage access to healthy foods.
Right, a noble goal. But the unintended consequence was that it became incredibly burdensome, if not impossible, for smaller stores to comply. You know, corner bodegas in urban food deserts or small rural general stores, they just don't have the shelf space, the supply chain access, or even the customer demand to stock 7 different types of staple foods.
So this policy hold is a way of protecting those smaller retailers, making sure they don't lose their ability to serve SNFP recipients.
Precisely. The hold stays in place until the Secretary of Agriculture amends the definition of variety and staple food to increase the number of items that qualify as acceptable. Until that revision is made, the less restrictive prior requirements apply. This is a legislative intervention to make sure that regulatory standards don't inadvertently create food access barriers by forcing small businesses out of the SNFP system. It's all about ensuring continued access for consumers who really rely on those local retailers.
Now we transition to the Department of Veterans Affairs, and this entire section provides a masterclass in how Congress uses advance funding to make sure veteran services, especially mandatory benefits, are completely insulated from the political gridlock we see over the annual budget.
It really is the highest form of stability Congress can provide for a mandatory program.
Well,
And it reflects the sacred nature of the commitment to veterans.
let's start with compensation and pensions. These are benefit payments mandated by law.
Right. So the bill provides $5.85 billion immediately for short-term needs. But the real headline here is the forward funding. $246.6 billion, which becomes available on October 1st, 2026, to cover the next fiscal year's obligations.
Okay, hold on. That's nearly $250 billion set aside a full year in advance. So it guarantees that benefit checks will not stop no matter what happens with the budget fight in January 2026.
Exactly. This is the definition of insulating benefits from politics. And that money remains available until it's all expended. We see the same mechanism for readjustment benefits, education and training.
How much for that?
$4.87 billion immediately, plus an additional $24.7 billion available on October 1st, 2026. This advance appropriation model is the legislative equivalent of a highly protected savings account just for veterans.
Turning to VA healthcare, Section 251 details specific, non-negotiable set-asides within the Health Administration funding. And this tells us where the VA's strategic priorities are right now.
And those priorities focus heavily on specific demographics and modern care delivery. The earmarks are massive.
Like what?
$1.429 billion is specifically for gender-specific care and programs for women veterans. This reflects the rapidly growing population of women using VA services. Then you have $698 million for suicide prevention outreach, $3.459 billion for veterans homelessness programs, and $709 million for opioid prevention and treatment programs.
I want to focus on the telehealth allocation. $6.356 billion. That is a colossal investment in remote care. How does that number compare to, traditional in-person capital investment? And what does it signal about the VA's future strategy?
It signals a massive long-term strategic pivot that's really driven by geography and necessity. The VA serves veterans spread across huge distances, many in rural or highly remote areas.
Right.
So $6.3 billion secures the technological infrastructure, the hardware, the connectivity, the staffing that's necessary to deliver mental health, specialty care, and basic checkups without requiring long-distance travel. It means access is no longer limited by brick-and-mortar facilities. It's a necessary solution to the post-pandemic reality of care delivery and just reaching veterans where they live.
Now let's talk about the Troubled Veterans Electronic Health Record Modernization, the EHR. This project has been plagued by huge cost overruns and implementation issues. So how does this temporary funding bill treat a multi-billion-dollar program that has struggled so much?
Congress is funding it, but they've put the program on a very tight leash.
Okay.
$3.4 billion is made available until September 30, 2028 for the EHR system. However, there's an immense caveat. 30% of those funds are contingent.
Contingent on what?
This is the accountability mechanism. That 30% is not available until July 1st, 2026, and it's only available if the Secretary of the VA submits a plan detailing 5 specific key milestones for the project's implementation.
So it's a performance bond.
Think of it exactly like that. Congress is saying, we know this project is necessary, but we are holding back nearly a third of the money until you can show us concrete, measurable progress toward deployment and stability. This prevents the VA from getting the full funding just because the program exists. They actually have to perform.
That's a huge financial lever to enforce transparency and accountability in a massive IT overhaul.
It speaks to the recognition that previous IT overhauls have failed when they didn't have these explicit, legislatively mandated performance metrics.
Let's shift to a very specific and highly emotional benefit expansion in Section 234. Fertility and adoption benefits for disabled veterans.
This is a profound, specific benefit expansion. It's for veterans who have a service-connected disability that prevents them from procreating. Funds from the medical services account can now be used to provide fertility counseling and treatment using assisted reproductive technology like IVF or adoption reimbursement.
What are the key details of that new benefit, especially around assisted reproductive technology?
Critically, the section specifies that while the benefits must align with existing policies for seriously injured active duty service members, Congress added 2 life-changing exemptions.
Okay.
First, the existing military policies time periods regarding embryo cryopreservation and storage. They shall not apply.
So no time limit.
Exactly. And second, the term includes embryo cryopreservation and storage without limitation on the duration of that cryopreservation and storage.
Without limitation on duration. That is a huge removal of financial and emotional burden. It essentially guarantees these veterans can store embryos indefinitely as they navigate family planning and future treatment options.
Yeah. It ensures that the planning and timing of starting a family is governed by the veteran's medical needs and personal choices, not by some arbitrary bureaucratic expiry date on their stored biological material. It's a crucial legislative recognition of the long-term impact of service-connected disabilities on family life.
Finally, in Division G, we see the extension of several vital VA authorities through September 30, 2026, regardless of the CR's January expiry.
Right. These extensions lock in programs for the full fiscal year. They include specialized medical care for certain veterans with service-connected disabilities, and, importantly, the extension of the Staff Sergeant Parker Gordon Fox Suicide Prevention Grant Program. This ensures that organizations focusing on this critical issue can plan their operations for the entire year without worrying about a potential funding gap in late January.
Now, Division F addresses critical Medicare and public health programs. And since the CR is only temporary until January 30, 2026, these extensions generally align with that short timeline, right?
Sure.
Just buying Congress a few more months to debate the full budget.
Exactly, and these are essential to maintain the structural integrity of the public health system. We see the extension of funding for community health centers, the National Health Service Corps, and teaching health centers.
So FQHCs.
The FQHCs and teaching centers. They are the frontline providers of low-cost primary care, often serving communities that are otherwise medically underserved. Losing their funding, even for a day, would cause a crisis. The special diabetes programs are also extended.
And again, telehealth is a major theme. What are the key extensions for Medicare telehealth that impact seniors?
The Medicare telehealth extensions run through January 30th, 2026, and this is crucial for maintaining that pandemic-era flexibility. It includes continuing telehealth services for federally qualified health centers and rural health clinics.
Okay.
And critically, it delays the implementation of in-person requirements for mental health services furnished via telehealth, and it extends the use of audio-only telehealth services.
Audio-only services. That's vital, isn't it? Especially for older Americans who may not have a reliable broadband or the latest tech setup. It ensures equity of access.
Precisely. If they require a mandatory video link, you immediately cut off the most vulnerable populations. The audio-only extension is a necessary short-term measure to bridge that digital divide.
And then there's this highly technical provision that affects physician payment and, ultimately, access to care. The Work Geographic Index Floor.
Yeah, Section 6207 extends the Work Geographic Index Floor until January 31st, 2026. And this is legislative jargon for a crucial subsidy.
Okay, break that down for us.
The Work Geographic Index adjusts Medicare payments to doctors based on the cost of living and running a practice in their specific region. Without this floor, physicians practicing in lower cost, often rural areas, would see their reimbursement drop significantly.
So we can think of this floor as a deliberate measure to prevent a brain drain of medical professionals from rural communities.
Absolutely. It ensures that specialists and doctors can afford to continue practicing in smaller towns, reducing the financial incentive to just consolidate into high-cost urban centers. Securing this extension, even temporarily, is a major stability measure for the provider community and for patients in those areas.
Moving away from direct appropriations, this act is a vehicle for some really important regulatory policies, particularly concerning the FDA and internal government management. These are the policy shifts hiding in plain sight.
This section demonstrates how Congress pushes administrative change even when it's focused on just passing a temporary budget. Let's start with the FDA's relationship with the pharmaceutical industry, specifically over-the-counter drugs.
This title focuses on the over-the-counter monograph drug user fee amendments, or OTCMOF. What's the core mechanism of these user fees, and why are they so critical for non-prescription medications?
The core concept is that the industry, the companies making things like Tylenol or cold medicines, they pay fees, the OTCMOF, directly to the FDA.
Yeah.
And these fees are dedicated solely to funding the FDA's specific activities related to OTC monograph drugs. This mechanism, which streamlines the approval process for non-prescription drugs, is reauthorized all the way through FY 2030. It's an example of industry paying to ensure a faster, more predictable regulatory path.
The most consumer-relevant part here seems to be the RX to non-prescription switch. I mean, we all want access to proven prescription drugs without needing a doctor visit. How is the CR accelerating this?
Congress is mandating action. Section 6507 requires the FDA to issue guidance within 18 months to significantly increase the clarity and predictability of approving applications for prescription drugs transitioning to OTC status.
But it specifies certain drugs.
It specifies that the guidance must address prescription drugs that have well-established safety profiles. The goal is to cut the red tape and reduce the regulatory ambiguity that currently delays the transition of safe, proven medications to consumer shelves. Ultimately, it should lower healthcare costs and increase convenience.
That seems like a clear mandate to speed up access. And this is coupled with a major modernization effort regarding how drug safety and effectiveness are proven, especially for topical products like sunscreens, bringing in this hot topic of real-world evidence.
This is a huge shift in regulatory science. Section 6506 requires the FDA to utilize standards that allow for real-world evidence, or RWE, when evaluating the safety and effectiveness of active ingredients in non-prescription drugs intended for topical administration.
Okay, let's break down RWE for our listeners. What does real-world evidence actually mean, and how is it different from a traditional clinical trial?
A traditional clinical trial is this expensive, controlled, bespoke environment. RWE is data collected outside of those highly controlled trials.
So from where?
It can include data from electronic health records, insurance claims, patient registries, large observational studies, or even data collected from wearables. For topical drugs like sunscreen, RWE means the FDA can look at years of data showing how a specific ingredient has performed safely in the general population, rather than relying only on new, costly trials. It speeds up approval and reduces the burden on manufacturers without sacrificing safety.
And related to that modernization, the bill explicitly addresses the ethical concerns around animal testing.
Correct. The FDA must issue new draft guidance within 1 year on how sponsors can use non-clinical testing alternatives to animal testing for topical drugs. So, connecting the dots. The government is simultaneously pushing the FDA toward using modern data streams like RWE and modern non-animal testing methods. It signals a clear, long-term strategy to update how consumer product safety is evaluated.
Beyond drugs, there are significant policy limits placed on the FDA concerning 2 major food safety and health initiatives. Let's start with sodium reduction.
This is Section 775, and it's basically a pause button. Funds cannot be used to develop or implement final guidelines for long-term, population-wide sodium reduction until the FDA completes a thorough assessment of the impact of the short-term targets they already issued.
So Congress is making the agency measure the effectiveness of current policies before moving ahead with stricter mandates.
That's right. And it's also looking at potential unintended consequences.
And the second major restriction deals with a big industry concern: the food traceability rule.
Section 780 imposes a massive delay. The enforcement of the new traceability rule, which was published way back in November 2022, is prohibited prior to July 28, 2028.
2028, that's a huge delay.
It is, and furthermore, the FDA has to engage in quarterly consultations with regulated entities to identify and implement flexibilities for satisfying this complex, lot-level tracking requirement.
Why such a long delay? I mean, traceability sounds like a basic health safeguard.
It is a safeguard, but the new rule requires highly complex digital lot-level tracking across the entire supply chain, from the farm to the processor to the grocery store.
Okay.
For small farms, specialized distributors, and independent restaurants, implementing this kind of IT system and retraining staff is a massive undertaking. The 2028 delay, coupled with the mandatory quarterly meetings, signals that Congress acknowledges the practical implementation burden is just too high, and they need several years for the industry to adapt and for the FDA to ensure the rules are flexible enough for small players.
Finally, we turn to the internal stability of the federal government itself, specifically protecting the civilian workforce during this temporary funding period.
Right. And Section 120 is a major protection for federal employees. It's a clear, explicit prohibition on reductions in force, or RIFs.
The prohibition on RIF.
Federal funds cannot be used to initiate, carry out, or even notice a reduction in force between the date of enactment and January 30th, 2026. This is a crucial safety measure to ensure that temporary budget uncertainty can't be used as a political excuse for long-term personnel cuts. It just stabilizes the entire federal apparatus during the budget debate.
But what if an agency, anticipating a lapse, had already jumped gun and announced a RIF between October 1st and the date this bill was enacted?
Any RIF initiated in that brief window is explicitly declared void. Section 120 mandates that affected employees must be returned to employment status as of September 30, 2025, without interruption, and they get all the back pay and compensation they would have been entitled to.
So it's a strong retroactive protection.
It's very strong.
There's also a fascinating section that addresses the financial burden placed on state and local governments when the federal government fails to pass a budget.
This is Section 118, Reimbursement for State Furlough Costs. It says that if a state or a federal grantee uses its own funds to continue a federal program like SNAP benefits or road construction, or compensates furloughed federal employees during a funding lapse, the federal government must reimburse them for those expenses.
And the interesting detail is the interest payment requirement.
Yes, the reimbursement has to include interest calculated under specific Title 31 provisions. This is a punitive measure against the federal government's own failure to pass a budget on time. It discourages states and local governments from having to bear the cost and financial instability caused by federal gridlock.
And finally, protecting the inner mechanics of the USDA's shared financial systems.
This focuses on the Working Capital Fund, the WCF, and the National Finance Center, or NFC. Sections 702 and 725 place strict requirements on transferring unobligated discretionary funds into the WCF, especially for IT services requiring prior congressional approval.
And the NFC.
Crucially, the NFC's core functions, payroll and financial management, have to remain in place and under NFC management. This is about securing the federal employee payroll system from unauthorized changes or relocations, ensuring that the most basic function of the government paying its staff is protected.
So Division C gives us a highly detailed look into how Congress budgets for its own operations. And it really reflects the internal priorities and specifically the heightened security concerns facing lawmakers today.
The funding reflects a direct response to recent threats and the need for updated digital and physical security. It's a very pragmatic approach to self-preservation, which Congress has prioritized even under a CR.
Starting with the security force, the Capitol Police.
The Capitol Police receive a massive allocation of $653.4 million for salaries and expenses, and $80 million of that is specifically designated for overtime, which recognizes the high operational tempo required to protect that sprawling campus.
But the security concern has shifted, hasn't it? From just protecting the building to protecting the people, often their home states.
Absolutely. And the allocations for personalized security are significant. The House allocates a staggering $100 million for activities associated with providing security for members of the House, their delegates, the resident commissioner, and their immediate families.
$100 million.
And that's separate from the Capitol Police's base funding. It focuses on personal protection measures, including security enhancements at homes and coordination with local law enforcement.
And the Senate shows a similar commitment to extending security beyond Washington, D.C.
The Senate receives an additional $18.5 million specifically for enhanced security. This includes $5 million for coordination of member security programs, $10 million dedicated specifically to security-related activities for state offices, and $3.5 million for the Residential Security System program. This just acknowledges that the threat level is highest when legislators are outside the protective bubble of the Capitol.
Now let's tackle Section 213, Congressional Data Protection. This is arguably one of the most significant policy riders in the entire bill, creating powerful digital privacy protections for Senate data.
This is Congress creating a kind of digital speech or debate clause. It's designed to defend the separation of powers in the modern digital era. Section 213 significantly broadens protections for Senate data, and it explicitly defines covered data to include any electronic mail or other electronic or data communication, other data including metadata or other information.
So it's not just the content of an email that's protected, but the associated metadata, who they called, when they called, who they emailed. What obligation does this put on the cloud providers, the tech companies holding this data?
This is the hammer. If an external provider for a Senate office gets any legal process, a warrant, a subpoena, anything seeking disclosure of Senate data, that provider shall notify the Senate office and the Office of the Sergeant at Arms in writing.
Okay.
And crucially, the provider is explicitly barred from being limited by any court order or statutory provision from providing that notice. They're given immunity for complying with this notification requirement.
That is a legislative override of typical non-disclosure orders. It ensures Congress knows immediately if an executive branch agency or law enforcement is trying to access their communications. And the penalty for violating this is incredibly aggressive.
The bill creates a private cause of action for senators, allowing them to sue over violations. And if a senator prevails, the court awards statutory damages of $500,000 or the amount of actual damages for each instance of a violation.
$500,000 per instance. How is an instance defined to make that penalty such a huge deterrent?
It's defined very broadly and aggressively. An instance includes each discrete act. So each individual device, each account, each record, or each communication channel subject to collection in violation of the section, or each non-disclosure order sought, or each search conducted. It creates immense legal and financial risk for any external entity trying to circumvent the notification process. It is an explicit defense of the independence of the legislative branch in the digital age.
Moving to modernization and staffing, we see dedicated funds for congressional interns.
Yes. The bill seeks to professionalize the pathway to working on Capitol Hill by funding compensation. $7 million is allocated solely for financial compensation to Senate interns, and $20.6 million is available for compensation of interns in House member offices.
So this helps ensure that these opportunities are accessible to students from lower income backgrounds, not just those who can afford to work for free.
That's the idea.
And finally, a small but important investment in governmental transparency from the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO.
The CBO must spend at least $500,000 on improving its technical systems and models to increase the transparency of its budgetary estimates to Congress and the public. In a polarized environment where cost estimates are often weaponized, increasing transparency about the underlying models, the economic assumptions, and the data the CBO uses is essential for informed policy debate and for maintaining public trust in government forecasting.
This deep dive into H.R. 5371 has been an incredible demonstration that even when Congress is fighting over a temporary budget, massive, detailed policy decisions are still being advanced.
The key takeaway here is that this legislation serves two distinct but critical purposes. First, it ensures the basic, necessary, and restrictive continuation of federal funding, preventing an administrative crisis until January 30th, 2026. This is the government fulfilling its immediate operational obligations.
And the second purpose, revealed through all those targeted policy riders and exceptions.
It's the advancement of strategic priorities that Congress absolutely refused to pause. This CR is a vehicle for guaranteeing long-term commitments, like a next-generation E-7 wedge-tail defense aircraft, the crucial stability provided by the Rural Housing Insurance Fund, and that profound, life-changing expansion of fertility benefits for disabled veterans. It shows that the true legislative work often happens in the highly specific details, far from the spotlight of the major appropriations battles.
So it's the tension between the immediate necessity of just keeping the lights on and the long-term strategic planning that informs everything from military readiness to healthcare access.
Exactly. This deep dive shows that even when the overall funding is temporary, the regulatory and policy shifts embedded within it are permanent. The changes mandated within the FDA to use real-world evidence for topical drugs, or that long delay for the food traceability rule, indicates a significant, quiet shift in administrative approach.
So the final provocative thought for you, the listener, is this. The vast majority of legislative action is highly technical and specific, as we've seen. You may never see the headline about the work geographic index score, but it directly impacts whether a specialist can afford to practice in your community.
So consider this. What major regulatory change might be impacting your daily life right now, hiding in plain sight in a seemingly minor legislative extension? Whether it's the shift toward RWE speeding up the safety review of your next non-prescription medicine, or the guaranteed lifetime storage of biological material for a disabled veteran, these highly specific financial and regulatory decisions ultimately translate into tangible services and stability in your communities.
A lot to digest. But now you are truly well informed about the complex mechanism keeping the government running until January 30th.